The morning sun cast long shadows across the massive control room as Dr. Lisa Park stared at the screens showing Earth from space. For the first time in human history, their planet was about to disappear from the galaxy's view completely. She had spent the last 15 years of her life working toward this moment, but now that it was here, her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the activation switch. Lisa wasn't alone in the underground facility. Buried deep beneath the Swiss Alps, hundreds of the world's brightest scientists, engineers, and military personnel had gathered to witness what they called the Great Isolation Protocol. The room buzzed with nervous energy as everyone understood the weight of what they were about to do. Earth was about to cut itself off from the rest of the galaxy, and there would be no going back. The story really began 20 years earlier when the Galactic Empire first made contact with Earth. At first, humanity was thrilled to learn they weren't alone in the universe. The Empire seemed friendly enough, offering trade agreements and advanced technology in exchange for Earth's resources and brightest minds. But what started as cooperation slowly turned into something much darker. Captain Rodriguez, the head of Earth's space defense, remembered those early days vividly. He had been a young officer when the first Imperial ships arrived, their massive vessels dwarfing anything humanity had ever built. The Empire's representatives spoke of prosperity and progress, painting pictures of a galaxy where Earth could thrive as part of their vast civilization, but the reality was far different from their promises. The Empire's trade deals always seemed to favor them heavily, taking Earth's most valuable resources while giving back technology that was already outdated by galactic standards. Worse still, they began requesting Earth's most brilliant scientists and engineers to come work in their research facilities across the galaxy. Many went willingly, excited by the opportunity to work with advanced alien technology. Those who returned told disturbing stories. They spoke of research facilities that felt more like prisons, where human creativity was used to solve the Empire's problems, while the humans themselves were treated as little more than valuable tools. Some never returned at all, and the Empire's explanations for their disappearance were always vague and unsatisfying. Dr. Park herself had almost been recruited by the Empire during her early career. She was a brilliant quantum physicist, exactly the kind of mind they were looking for. But something about their representatives had made her uncomfortable. They smiled too much, promised too easily, and never gave straight answers to her technical questions. When she declined their offer, their friendly demeanor shifted noticeably, though they tried to hide it. The breaking point came 5 years ago when the Empire introduced what they called the Galactic Citizenship Program. They claimed it was voluntary, but the pressure on Earth's governments was enormous. The program required young adults to serve 2 years in the Imperial military, supposedly to learn about galactic civilization and bring knowledge back to Earth. General Thompson, Earth's military commander, had fought against the program from the beginning. He recognized it for what it really was: forced conscription disguised as an opportunity. The Empire was taking Earth's young people and turning them into soldiers for their endless expansion wars. Many of those who served came back changed, some with strange implants, others with gaps in their memory. It was during this time that Lisa began working on what would eventually become the Isolation Protocol. She had been studying the Empire's technology for years, trying to understand how their sensors and tracking systems worked. If Earth was going to break free from Imperial control, they needed a way to hide completely. The project was kept secret from the Empire, naturally. Lisa and her team worked in hidden facilities, using resources that were officially allocated to other projects. They called themselves the Prometheus Group, after the mythical figure who stole fire from the gods. In their case, they were stealing the knowledge needed to hide from galactic gods. The science behind the Isolation Protocol was incredibly complex, but the basic idea was surprisingly simple. The Empire's ships and sensors worked by detecting quantum signatures that all matter naturally emitted. By creating a field that absorbed and redirected these signatures, Earth could become essentially invisible to Imperial technology. Building the quantum barriers required technology that didn't exist yet. Lisa's team had to invent new materials. develop new energy sources, and solve physics problems that had stumped scientists for decades. They worked around the clock, knowing that every day brought more imperial demands and more of Earth's people disappearing into the Empire's vast machine. The hardest part wasn't the science, though it was convincing Earth's leaders to actually use the technology once it was ready. Many governments had grown comfortable with their imperial trade relationships, even if they weren't entirely fair. The idea of completely cutting off contact with the galaxy terrified politicians who worried about Earth's economy and security. Lisa spent months traveling the world, demonstrating the technology and explaining why isolation was necessary. She showed them classified reports about the fate of other worlds that had tried to resist imperial control. Some had been completely stripped of resources. Others had seen their populations reduced to slavery. A few had simply vanished entirely, with the Empire claiming they had joined the galactic community. In some unspecified way, the debate raged for 2 years in the United Nations and every major government. Some argued that Earth should try to negotiate better terms with the Empire rather than hiding. Others worried that the isolation protocol might trap Earth if a real external threat appeared. Lisa argued that the Empire was the real threat, and that hiding was Earth's only chance to develop independently. The decision finally came when Imperial forces arrived to enforce a new recruitment quota. That would have taken 50,000 young adults from Earth. That was the moment when even the most Empire-friendly politicians realized that cooperation was really just delayed conquest. Now, standing in the control room with her finger on the activation switch, Lisa felt the weight of that decision. Around her, technicians gave final status reports as the massive quantum generators came online. The energy required to maintain the barriers would drain Earth's power grid for months until fusion reactors could be built to handle the load permanently. Admiral Chun, the head of Earth's space forces, watched the status screens carefully. His ships were positioned around the globe, ready to defend the barrier generators if something went wrong during activation. Everyone knew this was their one chance. If the barriers failed to activate properly, the Empire would detect the attempt, and Earth would face immediate retaliation. The countdown began at 60 seconds. Lisa felt her heart pounding as she watched the power levels climb on her screens. 15 years of work, billions of dollars, and the hopes of all humanity came down to this moment. Around the world, similar control rooms were making final preparations. As the global activation sequence began at 30 seconds, warning lights began flashing as the quantum field generators reached critical power levels. The air itself seemed to hum with energy as forces beyond normal human experience began shaping reality around Earth. Lisa could feel the static electricity making her hair stand up as the barriers prepared to snap into existence. At 10 seconds, she closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to whatever forces might be listening. When she opened them again, her finger was steady on the activation switch. Earth was about to become the first planet in galactic history to successfully hide from the Empire. The countdown reached 0, and Lisa pressed the switch that would change everything. 6 months had passed since Earth disappeared from galactic view, and Lieutenant David Kim thought he had seen everything the quantum barriers could do. As the head of orbital security, he spent 12 hours a day monitoring the massive energy field that kept Earth hidden from Imperial sensors. The job had become routine, checking power levels, adjusting field harmonics, and filing reports that always said the same thing: all systems normal, no contacts detected. That's why the alarm that woke him at 3 in the morning was so shocking. David rushed to the orbital monitoring station, still pulling on his uniform as he ran through the corridors of the space platform. His team was already gathered around the main display screen, their faces pale with confusion and fear. "Sir, you need to see this," called out Sergeant Williams, the night shift supervisor. She pointed to a red blip on the screen that shouldn't have existed. "We're getting a solid contact in Grid 77, approximately 200 kilometers off the coast of Hawaii." David stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The quantum barriers were supposed to be perfect. Dr. Park and her team had tested them thousands of times. Nothing could get through without triggering every alarm. system they had built. Yet there it was, a clear signature of something that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. Run a full diagnostic on all sensors, David ordered, hoping this was just equipment failure. Check the barrier generators in that sector. Maybe we're seeing a ghost echo from the field itself. The next 20 minutes felt like hours as his team ran every test they could think of. The sensors were working perfectly. The barriers were at full strength. The contact was still there, and it was definitely real. Whatever was sitting in the Pacific Ocean had somehow passed through. Earth's most advanced defense system, like it wasn't even there, David made the call that would change everything. He ordered a reconnaissance flight to investigate the contact directly. Captain Torres, Earth's best pilot, volunteered to take a stealth aircraft to the coordinates and see what they were dealing with. The flight would take 2 hours, but David knew they couldn't wait for satellite imagery or long-range scans. They needed eyes on target immediately. While they waited, David pulled up everything they knew about Imperial technology. The intelligence files made for disturbing reading. The Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for over 1,000 years, conquering or controlling hundreds of worlds. They had technology that seemed almost magical to human scientists, devices that could manipulate space and time in ways that broke the laws of physics as Earth understood them. But even the Empire's most advanced ships couldn't simply ignore quantum barriers. The field around Earth was designed to block every known method of detection and travel. David had studied the technical specifications until he could recite them from memory. There was no way anything could get through without completely destroying the barriers in the process. Captain Torres reached the contact zone just as the sun was rising over the Pacific. Her voice came through the radio with a tension that made David's stomach clench. "Control, I have visual contact with the target." "You're not going to believe this." The object floating on the ocean's surface looked like nothing in Earth's databases. It was roughly the size of a city bus but shaped like a teardrop, with a surface that seemed to shift between different colors as Torres circled it. Most disturbing of all, it cast no reflection on the water beneath it, as if it wasn't entirely present in normal space. "It's definitely artificial," Torres reported. "I'm detecting energy signatures that don't match anything in our files. The whole material appears to be some kind of smart metal that's actively changing its structure." "Sir, I don't think this thing is from our dimension." David felt his blood run cold. Dimensional travel was theoretical science on Earth, something that existed only in research papers and science fiction movies. If the Empire had developed the ability to move between parallel dimensions, it would explain how they had bypassed the quantum barriers. They hadn't broken through the field. They had simply stepped around it. The decision to land and investigate was the hardest of David's career. Every protocol said to maintain distance from unknown alien technology. But this wasn't just any alien contact. This was proof that Earth's defenses had been compromised. They needed to understand how this ship had arrived and whether more were coming. Torres set her aircraft down on a floating platform, 2 kilometers away from the mysterious vessel. A team of scientists and security personnel had been dispatched by submarine to meet her there. David watched through satellite feeds as they approached the Imperial ship in small boats, every moment expecting weapons to activate or the ship to simply vanish back to wherever it had come from. The ship remained silent as they drew closer. Detailed scans revealed that it was powered but dormant, like a computer in sleep mode. There were no life signs aboard, but the energy patterns suggested sophisticated artificial intelligence systems. Most importantly, there were clear signs that the ship had been there for weeks, not hours. Dr. Patterson, the team's xenotechnology specialist, was the first to board the alien vessel. Her voice shook with excitement and terror as she described what she found inside. "The interior is completely different from the outside dimensions. It's bigger inside than it should be, and the walls seem to be displaying information in languages I don't recognize. There are 3 compartments that appear to be designed for humanoid occupants." The discovery of the ship's crew came an hour later. They weren't aboard the vessel itself, but had been living underwater in a temporary base constructed on the ocean floor directly beneath their ship. The base was a marvel of Imperial engineering, a self-contained environment that had been completely invisible to Earth's sensors. When David's team finally located and accessed the underwater facility, they found 3 Imperial operatives in a state of suspended animation. The aliens looked almost human except for their pale blue skin and eyes that were completely black. Their equipment was beyond anything Earth scientists had seen, devices that seemed to operate on principles that human physics couldn't explain. The most shocking discovery came when Dr. Patterson managed to access the Imperial computer systems. The data revealed that this wasn't a random scouting mission. The Empire had known about Earth's isolation protocol from the beginning. They had detailed plans for infiltrating the barrier system and had been preparing this mission for over a year. The reconnaissance team hadn't just been watching Earth. They had been mapping the quantum barriers from the inside, identifying weaknesses and potential entry points. Their dimensional technology allowed them to exist in a parallel space, where they could observe and study without being detected by normal sensors, but the most disturbing revelation was yet to come. The Imperial data suggested that this small reconnaissance ship was just the first of many. The Empire was preparing a massive infiltration operation that would put operatives on every continent. They weren't planning to destroy Earth's barriers. They were planning to study them, copy them, and eventually turn them against humanity. David realized that Earth's greatest defense had become its greatest vulnerability. By hiding from the Empire, they had given their enemies time to develop new technologies specifically designed to counter the quantum barriers. The isolation that was supposed to protect Earth had instead given the Empire a perfect testing ground for their most advanced infiltration techniques. As he watched the Imperial ship being transported to a secure research facility, David knew that everything had changed. Earth was no longer hidden. The enemy was already inside their defenses. And somewhere in the depths of space, more Imperial ships were preparing to follow the same dimensional pathways that had brought the first scouts through their supposedly impenetrable barriers. The war that Earth thought it had avoided by hiding was about to begin in earnest. Captain Rachel Stone never trusted her new neighbor. There was something about the way he smiled that didn't reach his eyes, how he always seemed to know a little too much about current events, and the fact that his apartment never seemed to have any normal background noise. As the director of internal security for the North American sector, Rachel had developed an instinct for spotting things that didn't belong. The investigation started 3 weeks after the Pacific incident when David Kim's team discovered the Imperial reconnaissance ship. Rachel's job was to make sure no other Imperial operatives had made it to Earth's surface. What she found instead was far worse than anyone had imagined. It began with a simple background check on Thomas Miller, the neighbor who had moved in 6 months ago, right around the time Earth activated its quantum barriers. His paperwork was perfect: birth certificate, school records, employment history, even childhood photos. But when Rachel dug deeper, she found tiny inconsistencies that made her skin crawl. The dental records didn't quite match the X-rays from his supposed childhood dentist. His fingerprints were in the system, but the ridge patterns showed signs of surgical alteration. Most damning of all, a genetic test revealed DNA markers that didn't exist anywhere else in Earth's population database. Thomas Miller was not human. Rachel's discovery sent shockwaves through Earth's security apparatus. If one Imperial operative had been living among them undetected, how many others were out there? She assembled a team of 20 investigators and began the most important manhunt in human history. What they uncovered over the next month changed everything they thought they knew about the Imperial infiltration. The operatives weren't recent arrivals who had somehow bypassed the quantum barriers. They had been on Earth for decades, some even longer. They had been preparing for this moment long before humanity even knew the barriers were possible. Detective Harrison Chun became Rachel's most valuable asset in the investigation. He had a gift for spotting patterns that others missed, and his background in organized crime gave him insights into how sleeper networks operated. Harrison's first major breakthrough came when he realized that many of the suspected operatives had moved to their current locations within a 6-month window. all getting jobs in what seemed like random industries, but the jobs weren't random at all. One operative worked for the power company that supplied electricity to the quantum barrier generators. Another was employed by the telecommunications firm that handled encrypted communications between Earth's defense facilities. A third had somehow gotten a position with the transportation authority that managed supply routes to military installations. The Imperial infiltration wasn't just about gathering intelligence. They had positioned themselves to sabotage Earth's defenses from within. Rachel realized they were facing an enemy that had been planning this operation for longer than most of their security personnel had been alive. The scope of the infiltration was breathtaking in its complexity and patience. These weren't soldiers or spies in the traditional sense. They were deep cover agents who had built entire fake lives while waiting for orders that might never come. The most disturbing discovery came when Harrison tracked down the source of the forged documents that had allowed the operatives to blend into human society. The trail led to a printing company in Denver that had been owned by the same family for 3 generations. The current owner, Patricia Wong, had no idea that her grandfather's business partner from 40 years ago had been an Imperial agent. The printing company had been producing false identities for Imperial operatives since before Earth even knew aliens existed. Generations of sleeper agents had been infiltrating human society, building networks, and waiting for the day when they would be activated. Rachel's investigation revealed that the Imperial strategy was brilliantly patient. Rather than trying to conquer Earth through military force, they had chosen to hollow it out from within. By the time humanity realized what was happening, the operatives would control enough critical infrastructure to bring down Earth's defenses. Without firing a shot, the breakthrough that cracked the entire network wide open came from an unexpected source. Dr. Susan Park, a psychiatrist working with trauma victims, noticed a pattern in several of her patients. They all complained of strange dreams involving geometric symbols and voices speaking in unknown languages. What made it even stranger was that these patients had no connection to each other and came from different parts of the city. When Rachel interviewed Dr. Park's patients, she discovered that they all lived within a 5-block radius of suspected Imperial operatives. The dreams weren't random, they were side effects of Imperial communication technology that operated on frequencies that affected human brain chemistry. Harrison coordinated a series of simultaneous raids across 12 major cities. What they found in the operatives' homes was a treasure trove of advanced technology and intelligence that painted a terrifying picture of Imperial capabilities. The agents had been reporting on everything from military movements to scientific research to political decisions, but the most shocking discovery was found in a basement laboratory beneath a house in Chicago. The Imperial operative living there, who had been posing as a college professor for 15 years, had been conducting experiments on human subjects. The lab contained detailed studies of human physiology, psychology, and genetics. The experiments weren't designed to harm humans directly. Instead, they were focused on understanding how to control human behavior and decision-making. The Imperial scientists had been developing methods to influence human thoughts, without the subjects ever realizing they were being manipulated. Rachel found evidence that several key political and military leaders had been exposed to these influence techniques during routine medical checkups over the past decade. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Some of Earth's most important decisions over the last 10 years might have been influenced by Imperial manipulation. The investigation took a personal turn when Rachel discovered that her own medical records showed signs of Imperial interference. A routine vaccination she had received 5 years ago contained microscopic devices that had been monitoring her brain activity and potentially influencing her thoughts. The violation felt worse than any physical assault. As the scope of the infiltration became clear, panic began to spread through Earth's population. Neighbors turned against neighbors as people wondered who among them might be Imperial agents. The paranoia threatened to tear apart the social fabric that held human civilization together. Rachel found herself at the center of the crisis, trying to balance the need for security with the preservation of human rights and freedoms. Every day brought new discoveries of imperial influence in unexpected places. A children's toy manufacturer had been embedding subliminal programming in their products. A popular social media platform had been using imperial algorithms to shape public opinion. The most heartbreaking cases were the humans who had unknowingly helped the imperial cause. These were ordinary people who had been manipulated into providing information or assistance without ever realizing they were being used. Many of them had formed genuine friendships with their imperial handlers, making the betrayal even more devastating. Rachel's team worked around the clock to map the entire network and neutralize the imperial operatives before they could carry out whatever plan they had been preparing for decades. But every lead seemed to reveal 10 more connections, like pulling on a thread that unraveled an entire tapestry of deception. The underground war had begun, and Rachel realized that Earth had been losing it for years without even knowing the battle was being fought. The question now was whether humanity could root out the infiltrators before they completed their mission, whatever that mission might be. Admiral Kate Cross was drinking her morning coffee when the impossible happened. She was standing on the observation deck of humanity's largest space station, watching Earth slowly rotate beneath them when the stars themselves seemed to shift and bend. What appeared next made her drop her coffee mug, sending hot liquid floating in zero gravity around the command center. An entire Imperial battle fleet had materialized inside Earth's quantum barriers. Massive warships, each one larger than any structure humanity had ever built, hung in space like deadly monuments to imperial power. Kate counted at least 50 vessels, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. The impossible had become reality in the span of 30 seconds. Everything humanity thought they knew about their defenses had just been proven wrong in the most terrifying way possible. All stations battle alert. Kate shouted into her communicator, but even as she gave the order, she knew how hopeless their situation was. Earth's entire space defense force consisted of 12 small patrol ships and a handful of orbital platforms. They were armed with weapons designed to stop asteroids and space debris, not warships that had conquered half the galaxy. The Imperial fleet had positioned themselves with surgical precision. Their largest ships hovered directly above Earth's major cities: New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai. Other vessels surrounded the space stations and orbital defense platforms. It was a textbook demonstration of overwhelming force, designed to paralyze any resistance before it could begin. Kate's worst fears were confirmed when every communication channel on Earth suddenly activated at once. The face that appeared on every screen, every device, every display was one that humanity knew from intelligence files but had hoped never to see in person. Emperor Valdris himself was addressing Earth directly. The Emperor looked exactly like the propaganda images, tall, imposing, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to look right through whoever was watching. But seeing him in real time, speaking directly to Earth's population, made Kate's blood run cold. This wasn't just another imperial expansion. This was personal. "People of Earth," the Emperor began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been refused anything in his 1,000-year life, "your experiment in isolation has come to an end. You have 72 hours to surrender your planet and submit to imperial authority. If you comply, your people will be treated with the respect due to any galactic citizens. If you resist, your world will serve as an example to others who might consider defying imperial will." Kate watched in horror as the Emperor continued his ultimatum. The terms were simple and completely unacceptable. Earth would dismantle its quantum barriers and join the Empire as a client world. Humanity's brightest minds would be relocated to Imperial research facilities. Earth's military would be disbanded and replaced with Imperial forces. Most devastating of all, 20% of Earth's population would be relocated to other Imperial worlds to serve as laborers and soldiers. The message ended with a demonstration of Imperial power that sent shockwaves around the world. One of their smaller warships fired a single beam at an uninhabited asteroid near Earth's moon. The asteroid, roughly the size of Manhattan, simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris field, it was there one moment and gone the next. As if it had never existed at all. Kate immediately called an emergency meeting with Earth's military leadership. The video conference included everyone from President Williams to General Martinez to the heads of every major defense organization. The mood in the virtual meeting room was grim as they faced the reality of their situation. "We have to consider surrender," said Secretary of Defense Johnson, his face pale with exhaustion. "We've seen what their weapons can do. If we resist, they'll turn our cities into craters." "Surrender isn't an option," General Martinez shot back. "You saw their terms. They want to break up our families, strip mine our planet, and turn our children into soldiers for their endless wars. We might as well be dead." Kate found herself caught between two impossible choices. As a military officer, she understood the reality of their tactical situation. Earth's forces couldn't hurt the Imperial fleet, let alone defeat it. But as a human being, she couldn't accept the idea of handing over billions of innocent people to alien overlords. The debate raged for hours as precious time ticked away. Some argued for negotiation, hoping to find middle ground with the Empire. Others pushed for a desperate military response, even if it meant certain defeat. Kate listened to every argument, knowing that whatever decision they made would determine the fate of humanity. The first crack in Earth's unity came when they discovered that not everyone was on the same side. Intelligence reports revealed that several high-ranking officials in various governments had been in secret communication with Imperial representatives for years. These weren't the sleeper agents that Rachel's team had been hunting. These were humans who had voluntarily chosen to collaborate with the Empire. Admiral Peterson, who commanded Earth's Pacific Defense Sector, had been feeding information to Imperial contacts for over 3 years. His justification was coldly logical. He believed that cooperation with the Empire was inevitable and that early collaboration would result in better terms for humanity. Defense Minister Reynolds from the European Union had made similar calculations. She argued that resistance would only lead to unnecessary suffering and that humanity should accept imperial rule gracefully. The fact that she had been secretly negotiating surrender terms without authorization made her arguments seem less like wisdom and more like betrayal. Kate realized that Earth's defenses had been compromised not just by alien infiltrators, but by human beings who had lost faith in their own species. The Imperial strategy had been brutally effective. They had identified humans who could be turned and use them to sabotage resistance from within. The situation grew worse when Kate's intelligence officers revealed the full scope of the collaboration. The Imperial fleet's perfect positioning wasn't just the result of advanced technology. They had detailed information about Earth's defense systems, emergency protocols, and command structures. Someone had been feeding them everything they needed to plan the perfect invasion. As the deadline approached, Kate found herself facing a rebellion within her own command structure. Several of her senior officers argued that resistance was hopeless, and that they should order their forces to stand down rather than waste lives in a futile gesture. Others demanded immediate military action, regardless of the consequences. The breaking point came when Emperor Valdris made a second broadcast, this time directed specifically at Earth's military leadership. The message was simple and devastating. The Empire knew everything about Earth's defenses because they had been receiving detailed intelligence reports for years. Several of Kate's own officers were named as Imperial collaborators. Kate watched her command structure crumble in real time as accusations flew and trust evaporated. The very people she needed to coordinate Earth's defense were either revealed as traitors or paralyzed by suspicion of their colleagues. The Imperial strategy had been perfect. They had crippled Earth's resistance before the first shot was fired. With 24 hours left before the deadline, Kate faced the hardest decision of her career. Earth's defenses were compromised, their command structure was in chaos, and their leaders were divided. The Imperial fleet hung in space above them like a sword waiting to fall. But even as everything seemed hopeless, Kate remembered something her grandfather had told her when she was a child. He had been a soldier in World War III and had seen humanity survive impossible odds before. Sometimes, he had said, The only way to win was to change the rules of the game entirely. Kate began to wonder if there might be another option, something that neither the Empire nor their human collaborators had considered. The answer would come from an unexpected source. Dr. James Wellington never expected to change the course of galactic history while working alone in his laboratory at 3 in the morning. As Earth's leading expert on alien biology, he had been studying the captured Imperial technology for weeks, trying to understand how their dimensional travel worked. What he discovered that night would transform humanity's greatest crisis into an opportunity that no one had seen coming. The breakthrough came when James was analyzing the energy patterns from the dimensional ship's computers. Hidden deep in the data files were references to something called the Devourers, ancient entities that the Empires own, records described with obvious terror. The more James dug into the encrypted files, the more disturbing the picture became. The Devourers weren't just another alien species. They were something far worse, beings that consumed entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. According to Imperial records, they had already destroyed thousands of worlds on the far edge of the galaxy and were moving steadily toward the Empire's core territories. James worked through the night, translating Imperial scientific reports and military assessments. What he found explained everything about the Empire's recent behavior. Their aggressive expansion, their desperate need for new resources and technology, their willingness to risk war with Earth, it all made sense now. The Empire wasn't conquering worlds because they wanted to. They were doing it because they were running out of time, the Imperial fleet hovering above. Earth wasn't just there to force humanity's surrender. They needed Earth's quantum barrier, technology to save their own civilization from complete annihilation. The barriers that humanity had built to hide from the Empire were exactly what the Empire needed to hide from the Devourers. When James called Admiral Cross with his discovery, her first reaction was disbelief. The idea that the mighty Galactic Empire was actually fleeing from an even greater threat seemed impossible. But as James shared more details from the Imperial files, Cross began to see the bigger picture. The Empire's invasion of Earth wasn't about conquest, it was about survival. Emperor Valdris hadn't come to destroy humanity. He had come to save his own people, even if it meant enslaving another species to do it. The realization changed everything about how Earth should respond to the crisis Cross made, a decision that would have seemed insane just hours earlier. Instead of preparing for a hopeless battle against the Imperial fleet, she opened secret communication channels with the enemy. Her message was simple but revolutionary. Earth knew about the Devourers, and humanity was willing to help. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within 6 hours, a small Imperial shuttle had landed at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The alien delegation was led by General Kira Voss, a battle-scarred veteran who looked like she hadn't slept in months. What she told the assembled Earth leaders changed everything. General Voss had been fighting the Devourers for over 20 years. She had watched as entire star systems disappeared, their populations consumed by entities that seemed to exist outside normal reality. The Empire's military couldn't stop them, their weapons couldn't hurt them, and their shields couldn't keep them out. Your quantum barriers are the first technology we've encountered that might actually work against them, Voss explained to the stunned Earth leaders. The Devourers exist partially outside normal spacetime. Your barriers don't just hide objects, they create a dimensional pocket that the Devourers can't penetrate. The revelation led to the most surreal negotiation in human history. Instead of discussing terms of surrender, Earth's leaders found themselves planning a joint defense against an enemy that neither species fully understood, the Imperial fleet. That had come to conquer Earth was now asking for humanity's help in the largest evacuation operation in galactic history. Dr. Lisa Park, the original architect of Earth's quantum barriers, found herself working alongside Imperial scientists who had been her enemies just days before. The challenge was enormous. They needed to modify the barrier technology to protect not just Earth, but dozens of Imperial worlds that lay in the Devourer's path. The work required combining human innovation with Imperial resources in ways that neither species had imagined possible. Imperial engineers brought manufacturing techniques that could build massive generators in weeks instead of years. Human scientists contributed theoretical breakthroughs that solved problems the Empire had been struggling with for centuries, but the collaboration wasn't easy. Many humans still saw the Imperials as invaders who couldn't be trusted. Many Imperials viewed humans as primitive beings who had stumbled onto advanced technology by accident. Both sides had to overcome centuries of mistrust and fear in a matter of days. Rachel Stone found herself working with former Imperial operatives who had been living on Earth for decades. The same aliens she had been hunting as spies were now providing crucial intelligence about Devourer attack patterns and weaknesses. It was a strange partnership, but the urgency of the situation left no room for old grudges. The first joint operation was a test of the modified barrier technology around one of the Empire's frontier worlds. James traveled to the Imperial Research Station to monitor the deployment, working alongside alien scientists who shared his fascination with solving impossible problems. When the barriers successfully activated around the entire planet, both species celebrated together, but their success was temporary. Long-range Imperial sensors detected the Devourer fleet advancing faster than expected. They had less than 6 months to protect the core Imperial worlds and establish a defensive perimeter that could hold back an enemy that had never been stopped before. Admiral Cross found herself commanding a joint fleet of human and Imperial vessels, something that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. The cooperation between former enemies was remarkable, but Cross knew that their greatest test was still coming. The Devourers had never encountered organized resistance on this scale. The evacuation of endangered Imperial worlds began immediately. Billions of aliens were relocated to planets protected by the new barrier technology. Earth opened its borders to Imperial refugees for the first time, creating temporary cities to house families whose worlds had been marked for destruction. The cultural exchange was unprecedented. Human children played with alien kids whose parents had grown up on distant stars. Imperial artists shared techniques that had been developed over millennia. Human musicians collaborated with alien composers to create songs that neither species could have imagined alone. Dr. Wellington established the Joint Research Initiative, combining the best minds from both civilizations to study the Devourer threat. What they discovered was both terrifying and hopeful. The Devourers were ancient beyond imagination, but they weren't invincible. The quantum barriers could stop them, but only if the technology was deployed on a massive scale. The alliance between Earth and the Empire grew stronger as they worked together against their common enemy. Former Imperial soldiers trained human defenders in advanced combat techniques. Human engineers taught Imperial workers how to build and maintain quantum generators with Earth's innovative methods. Emperor Valdris himself visited Earth to sign the formal alliance treaty, standing beside President Williams in the same building where his ultimatum had been delivered just months earlier. The Emperor acknowledged that humanity had saved the Empire from destruction. In return, he offered Earth full membership in a reformed galactic government based on cooperation rather than conquest. When the Devourer fleet finally arrived at the defensive perimeter, they encountered something they had never faced before. An entire galaxy united against them. The combined human Imperial fleet, protected by quantum barriers that spanned multiple star systems, held the line against an enemy that had consumed countless civilizations. The war was far from over, but for the first time in decades, the galaxy had hope. Earth's isolation protocol had become the foundation for the greatest alliance in galactic history. Humanity had not only survived their first contact with galactic civilization, they had helped save it.